We talk about the CHL Top Prospects game, some standouts from the game, and also from the on-ice testing on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be talking about the CHL Top Prospects game presented by Kubota. We'll start off with some standouts at forward, some players who played particularly well. We'll also talk about some standouts on defense, player who did well in on ice testing or just in the game overall, and then end things off with a segment on which players from this top prospects game raised their stock for the draft the most. We'll talk about Jett Luchanko particularly, who had an absolutely ridiculous on-ice testing session and a decent game, but also some real standouts from the game as well. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave us a like and subscribe. Also, leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next on the podcast. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this, make sure to make us your first listen of the day, and please leave a rate or review. Helps the channel out a lot. So let's get right into it with the standouts at forward. Well, we can start with the two players of the game for Team Red and Team White. Raoul Boilard, 2 goals and an assist on the only 3 goals scored for Team Red in that game. I think that's an easy start in terms of standouts, right?
It's not bad at all. I think Boilard is obviously a player that's been on our radar for a little while now, especially on yours. He's one of your personal favorites, and
Yep.
I'm sure he's going to be brought up towards the end of the first round in our upcoming meeting at Top Prospects on the weekend. But it was an excellent performance for Boilard. He was really able to show off his versatility and his various strengths in this game. I thought that the off-puck movement in the offensive zone was really impressive. He's really quite smart. And with a puck on his stick, too, he actually impressed me a lot more than I expected him to in this game. So what kind of stood out for you as someone that has been watching him for a couple months now? Was this a performance that was just kind of normal for him, or was it certainly one of the better games that you've caught of his?
This is kind of par for the course with me with Raoul Boilard. What always stands out with Boilard is the off puck habits, but also the on puck habits. The way that he looks off his passes, the way that he stops at the net. I mean, that's how he got his first goal of the game. He just stopped at the net, and the defenseman the forward who was ahead of him going to the net kind of flew by the crease. But Boilard stopped, and the puck was still loose. The goalie was lying down on the ice, kind of looking for the puck, and it was loose. No one could really see it. If the player who was ahead of him, I don't remember who it was, I think it was maybe Cole Baudouin or someone like that. If that player had stopped at the net, they would have gotten the goal. But Raoul Boilard stopped at the net, found the loose puck, and just stuffed it in an open cage. So that's how he got his first goal. And yeah, overall, the off puck habits are really, really solid. But also really like the way that he controls his pacing on the puck, the way that he uses speed differentials, both positively and negatively, in terms of either out racing opponents by kind of accelerating into space, but also slowing down in order to open up the ice in front of him and put defensemen on their heels. Habits wise, this is a really, really solid player. Chooses his spots to shoot the puck really well. And yeah, I mean, he scores a lot of NHL translatable goals, which is what you want to see from a player at the QMJHL level, which is a level that's really easy to not score NHL translatable goals in. You can just fire a puck from the blue line and it'll sometimes go in. It's not defensively and goaltending wise, it's not the most strong league. But yeah, I feel like Boilard has a style that really translates to the NHL pretty well. But outside of that, we can also talk about Team White's standout, which was Tijagila, who had a fantastic game while being surrounded by a lot of really good players. I thought that Tijagila was really the main standout for Team White and did really, really well. Had a couple of really good passes and really showcased how smart he is and how good his decision making is, right?
For sure, he was excellent in this game, and he's certainly making a case for himself towards the top end of that 10 to 20 range for me. I think that I still have to see a little bit more before I feel comfortable talking about him inside like the top 10 range. But
Mhm.
this game where he really just shone so brightly against the best players in his age group in the country was really impressive. And I think that one thing that stood out for both of us in this game was just how intelligent he is and just how lethal his off puck movement is. Like, whereas Raoul Boilard is very good, Iginla has another gear in terms of that, of really like the consistency of finding like the most dangerous place where he can be on the ice in the offensive zone. He more often than not finds his way there, and playing with a player like Andrew Crystal obviously has really helped develop that habit. But it really stood out so much for me in this environment away from his line mate, because playing with Andrew Crystal is like playing a little bit uneven mode sometimes in the offensive zone, because you can
Yeah.
just get the puck wherever you end up being, and you can probably get something out of it because the defense is probably going to be hyper fixated on Crystal. But in this game where everyone around him was pretty close to the kind of skill level, he really had to consistently find soft ice far more so than his competition or his teammates to stand out in that facet. So it was impressive that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a player who, I mean, I saw as a player who works really well off the puck, who has a great work rate, who finds space extremely well. But
Yeah.
I kind of was undersold on his ability to make plays with the puck, to find passing lanes as well as he did in this game. I mean, this is a player who consistently hit players in stride, who constantly made the right pass at the right moment with the right weight on it. Overall, I was really surprised with his playmaking ability. But yeah, he's been developing that gradually and making it a real tool of his game. And yeah, it really stood out in this game. But I also want to talk about Cole Baudouin, who had a really good game. Um, Kind of a big puck protector type of forward. I think he's one of the best puck protectors in this draft. The way that he shields the puck, the combination of size and technique isn't one that you usually see out of CHL prospects that are bigger. Usually, bigger prospects in the CHL tend to lack in the technique area of the game in terms of protecting pucks, but Baudouin protects pucks like he's 5'10" and feisty. Like he protects pucks the same way Tanner Howe does, and Tanner Howe is really good at what he does. But on top of that, Baudouin's like 6'3", 200 pounds, right? So he's a massive guy who's able to shield pucks really well, was able to make plays inside of puck protection mechanics. Like he's able to make a one-handed pass while shielding a player. He's able to get a shot off while driving the net and dropping the shoulder. I feel like there's a lot of power elements in this game that could be developed fairly well if you make him the right type of player. Kind of reminds me a bit of Yoel Armia, but I think with a bit better work rate, a bit more speed. So overall, yeah, a pretty decent prospect, and one that really I think made a name for himself and raised his draft stock in this tournament. Well, in this game rather. And then we have things off at forward in terms of standouts with my personal favorite OHLer of this bunch of forwards here. Liam Greentree was amazing in this game, right?
He was excellent, and he's been in a real hot run of form recently. Like ever since being named captain of the Windsor Spitfires, he's just been on fire. And I've caught a couple of his OHL games in that stretch, and it just seemed to get better every single game. Like he just came off a 6-point game last night on Saturday, so he's been playing some excellent hockey. But yeah, he definitely stood out in the CHL Top Prospects game. He has a level of maturity in the way he approaches the game that really stands out among a junior cohort. He's tremendously middle driven. He's really powerful, very intelligent, makes the subtle plays really well. He regularly makes like little one-touch plays just to get possession to a line mate and just like keep the cycle going. He very much likes to keep things in motion rather than becoming stagnant, which is something I like a lot. He's quite pacey in that facet, and
Yeah.
he also knows his own limitations a lot more than a lot of other junior level players do at this age, where like he really uses his line mates effectively and consistently rather
Mhm.
than seeking to do everything on his own, and that really allows him to maximize his toolkit and his intelligence. So
Oh,
he's a player that
100%.
has just consistently stood out and just like steadily risen the rankings for us this season for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Middle driven, uses speed differentials well, uses give
Yeah.
and goes well, finds space off the puck really well. Like there's so much maturity and advanced understanding of the game in his in his kind of toolkit, and he
And
has a
details.
just Yeah, really, really good details and also a ridiculous wrister. Like his shot is absurd
Yeah.
too. So it's like it's a great combination of tools, and it's the reason why I have him 10th overall in my rankings. But that wraps things up for our first segment about the standout forwards. Now we'll talk about some standout defensemen at this top prospect game. It was a low-scoring game, a 3-1 game, won by Team Red. So we have some stuff to say about defensemen coming up after these messages from our sponsors over at eBay Motors.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need at the prices you want to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and far more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is available to US customers only, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Alrighty, so let's move on to the defenseman who stood out in this game. I think we can start with Carter Yakemchuk, who was extremely entertaining. I'll say this like that. I mean, he was pulling out between the legs moves, kind of cutting across opponents, using his stick handling really, really well to find space. I mean, I don't think there was ever any doubt with Carter Yakemchuk that the tools are so good, right?
The tools are really good, and for everyone that's not a coach in a building watching him play, it's really fun often. And he
Mhm.
has a really nice little bag of skills they can like really go digging into and solve problems in ways that you're not really expecting a 6'3" right shot defenseman to solve them with, especially a CHL based one where like physicality and like roughness is really quite valued. But with Yakimchuk, he kind of plays a style of like a 5'9" right shot defenseman at times, where he's just trying to solve everything with skill. And you like to see him be a little bit more versatile in how he approaches problem solving with just his depth of tools. Because yes, he is really skilled, and that is one of his really good tools, but it's far from his only one. And I think that the puck protection ability and things like that have not really been on display very much in my viewing so far this season. That was certainly true in the CHL Top Prospects game. He was just going full like skill mode with the controller, and it was enjoyable to watch on the offensive side of the puck. But he was also certainly making a bit like some mistakes, and that is quintessential to how he approaches the game. He makes mistakes, and that is on the one hand very fun in terms of kind of like testing out his skill and refining his skill and learning through practice. That's all very fun. That said, there's still a lot of like warts in this game, and I think that was also quite apparent in the CHL Top Prospects game, despite the fun factor. So, can you talk to me a little bit through like the weaknesses that he has that make us a little bit more skeptical in terms of the NHL projection with Yakimchuk?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think he's too eager at times. Like he's looking to deke out of his out of his zone on the breakout. He's looking to kind of rifle passes to the furthest option possible to advance play as quick as possible. And like there isn't much chess in this game. He approaches it a bit like football, where he's just like football when you're down by 6 in the last minute of the game, where you need a Hail Mary pass and
He's a
you have to
scrambling quarterback to the core. Yes,
yeah,
100%.
exactly. It's just like Hail Mary after Hail Mary on every player, or like just like just carries and blitzes like through the like he's doing a lot. I'll say it like that. Like he's not a player who advances play intricately and intelligently. He's a player who tries to blow the puck up the first option with as much pace and aggression as possible, which is like it works at times, especially in the WHL. But like I don't see that as a translatable kind of path forward for him overall. And I think that's the main issue is that I like my especially my defensemen to play a bit of chess, like to think the game 3, 4, 5 steps in advance, and that's just not how Yakimchuk rolls. You're getting a gung ho defenseman if there ever was one. But moving on to Ben Danford, who had a pretty decent game. I thought he was extremely. I'd say the word is solid. Like he was really dependable, really reliable defensively, and was making simple, effective plays moving forward offensively. Right?
For sure. He reminded me a little bit of what's his name? Sorry, like the Team Canada defenseman at the World Juniors, who Furlong.
Yeah.
Like reminded me a bit of Jake Furlong's World Junior performances in the CHL Top Prospects game, where he knew his role. He knew that he wasn't going to be the Yakemchuk trying to solve every problem with skill, but he responded to everything with composure and some physicality and a very, very bread and butter performance, which is going to be very popular for the NHL scouts that were watching that game. I think that he did quite well to raise his draft stock in this performance. But yeah, like it was the consistency. He was consistently making the simple plays, but he was making them quickly and effectively. He was allowing his skilled teammates to solve the more complex problems when he was faced with them, which is exactly what you want from a player of his style and of his caliber. So I was quite impressed. I thought that he was thinking the game at a pacier level than most defensemen in this game, for sure.
For sure, and kind of the same thing for Charlie Elick. I thought he was a bit more aggressive than Danford, for sure. Like the way Elick approached the game was with a lot of power, a lot of aggression, a lot of kind of in your face play. Took a lot of shots from the point, but took them with intelligence and timing. Was making sure that there was a screen flying by or well positioned before taking the shots. And I saw a lot more just overall composure in this game that I've seen so far in the dub. I think that that's the main thing that's kind of left him outside of my first kind of outside of my top 40 so far. But I saw a bit more of what I wanted to see from Elick in this game, and that's made me want to go back and give him a closer look in terms of recent form to see how consistent that is. Because Charlie Elick with more composure, with more poise with the puck, and less kind of glassing out, panicky type of defending, is a really good version of Charlie Elick, and I want to see a bit more of that. So I'll definitely keep a closer look on him. And to end things off, we have to kind of talk about the obvious with Zayne Parekh, right? I mean, this wasn't even his best game, and I thought he was probably the best defenseman on the ice, right?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the strongest or deepest defenseman class in the world for the CHL compared to the last couple drafts. Like, I think beyond like the top end of Dickinson and Parekh, and then like the fringe first rounders or like late first rounders guys like Yakimchuk and who else, like Elick might be in that conversation, Henry
For
Muse,
sure.
but there's a lot less depth in terms of the defensive prospects in the CHL this season. So that certainly
Yeah.
helps Parekh kind of just stand out in a regular Zayne Parekh game, because as a
Mhm.
regular Zayne Parekh game is still absurdly dynamic and high pace and creative, and he was so confident with the puck on his stick. Like no defenseman in this game really came close in that facet. And yeah, he didn't play perfectly in his own zone. Like he's so intelligent defensively, but he's still kind of learning when to kind of be aggressive, when to hold back, when to take the positional approach, and when to just like go for the turnover. That's kind of like still a work in progress at times,
Yeah.
even though like he's learning that quite quickly. Like it's come so far in the last 4 or 5 months, which is very
Mhm.
promising, but it's still not a strength outright just yet. But yeah, he was very fun, very typical Zayne Parekh, but it was not his best game by any margin. So the fact that he was still quite likely the best defenseman on the ice in this game is quite amusing to me, because
Yeah.
Parech's awesome. I love that player. He's great.
Absolutely. I love a player who is so good that even on his like less impressive moments, he's still the best player on the ice at times. So that's definitely Zane Parekh for me. But that wraps things up for our second segment about the defensemen. Now we'll talk about some players who particularly like how their draft stock was affected by this top prospects game. Because whether NHL scouts like to admit it or not, this is a type of game and type of combine that they'll watch in order to see where players stand compared to their peers. We'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. If you're like me, one of the best parts of Super Bowl Sunday is watching the commercials. I think they're always really entertaining. You always kind of get curious about how creative the brands are going to get with commercials on any given Super Bowl. But what's even more fun is going for single game parlays, especially for a game as important as the Super Bowl. Go and make a couple bets supporting maybe your favorite team if they're playing in the game, if you're lucky enough for that. And if not, just sit back, relax, and with a little bit less stress, bet on some players in the game. So, new customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with the prospects who raised their draft stock the most after this game. We'll start off with, the standouts from the on ice testing, and there were some really really interesting results. But the one constant was Jett Luchanko. Man, he was on every top five in every category: lateral mobility, backwards skating, like strength. Like there's just so many different areas in which Jett Luchanko was a standout. So yeah, how do you think that affects the way NHL teams are going to approach this prospect? Because for me right now, he's on the verge of the like latter half of the second round, but I'm not really sold on him being a full on kind of. I've seen him like he appeared in the first round on Bob McKenzie's rankings, and having watched him, I understand why. He's listed at 5'10", 165 on the Elite Prospects website, but that's just plain wrong. He's easily like 6 foot, 185, something like that. He's a decently sized player. I like the pace, I like the power, I like the agility, I like the way that he moves off the puck. Decent defensively, but I see him as a kind of jack of all trades player. But how do you feel about the physical and technical abilities having been tested on the on ice results and seeing what the on ice results were with Luchanko? Like, how does that affect how NHL teams approach him?
It's like with the combine, right? Like it's always a little murky just how much effect that can have on draft rankings, whether they be public or private. Like I think with us specifically, it's usually interesting information, but it doesn't drastically change projections because again, these are taken in a vacuum and they don't really override the information that you get from seeing a player in game situations and seeing just how they are when you actually have to come and perform. But with the testing, what's really interesting to see is the particular tools that players have that are also a bit more mental. Like I think the reaction time is really really interesting to measure, and the fact that Luchanko stood out both in the regular reaction test, but especially the reaction test with the puck on his stick is telling. Like this is a player who's really quite adaptable. He can react very quickly when he's in a situation that he needs to get out of. And while I think that the handling tools to kind of like feed into that escapability are so certainly more of a work in progress than they are with like other prospects in this draft class, it certainly does offer a baseline that you can kind of work on. I think that what it does tell you is that okay, maybe if you can work on the handling skill specifically and make that a marquee part of Luchanko's game, then maybe you have a player that's going to be incredibly escapable in tight situations, even more so than he already is. So it can help you with a certain like very specific projections like that. But I think on the large scale of things, it only feeds what you see on the ice. Like these results mean nothing compared to what you see on the ice, right? Like for instance, forward skating speed, just because you can sprint past players doesn't mean you're going to be a very good NHL player. But it certainly is interesting, and I'm always curious to see how these affect like the rankings like published shortly after these results are made public. But yeah, what's your take on tests like this, like whether it be the combine or the CHL Top Prospects game that measure these tools?
Yeah, I feel like it's a really great tool to kind of weave through the mess and try to figure out like exactly where players stand. Obviously, you can get them on a good day and they're they've eaten the right things in the morning and gone the right workouts and that kind of things. And but I mean overall, you look at some of these results and they're really surprising. Like Beckett Seneca, I think, is another player who could have raised his draft stock drastically after this on ice testing list because you're looking at his weave agility with the puck. And I did not expect anyone to outperform Luke Misa, but Beckett Seneca is the best in that category. Weave agility in general as well. He was second. 30 meter back. I mean, backwards skating as well. Like I didn't expect Beckett Seneca's skating to be as good as it was because it doesn't seem like it when you're just watching him. But this is kind of a clear cut definition that like yeah, Beckett Seneca can skate and he can skate well. So it gives you a good kind of baseline to kind of figure things out from there. And it gives you a good idea of how players perform in the different areas that are kind of really, really important to the NHL game, like reaction time. Look at Tarek Parasak and those types of players that are up there. So it's like it gives you a good idea of where players stand on the real foundations of their game on which you can start building their game. But other standouts for me, just outside of the on ice testing, obviously Tij Ginla for me has put himself in the conversation for the you know at least in teams' eyes, because you're already talking about a player with a really good bloodline, and his performances at this game were a real standout. I feel like it's for me personally, it hasn't really budged because I don't really put too much influence in these games. They're almost friendlies. I mean, players are trying, of course they are, but it's not as intense as like a Memorial Cup game. Like, it's not the same vibe. So it's like, still, I think Iginla really showed an area of his game that I really didn't expect him to have in such high quality, and it's the intelligence, the advanced awareness, the anticipation in his game. I thought that was great. Raoul Boilard, for me, like, he played exactly where I have him ranked, which is 36th overall. I just don't think anyone has him that high so far, and he really stood out in this game. And I don't know, like, I wouldn't be surprised if after this you start seeing him pop up in first rounds, or at least higher than Maxime Massé is, because for me, he's kind of dug a trench between the two and solidified himself as the best QMJHLer. But then obviously, I mean, Liam Greentree, he scored the only goal for Team White, did really, really well in this game. Why do you think teams might target him in the top 10?
Oh, there are so many reasons for that. Like,
Yeah.
he's one of the most like pro style players available in this draft class would be one
Mhm.
thing that is just very appealing to NHL teams, especially ones that have perhaps like less mature like development staff that they don't like trust entirely just yet, or if they're like looking to like rebuild their development staff. Getting a guy like Greentree gives you a pass of basically like he's going to develop just fine. Like, yeah, you need to give him the regular nudges along the development path, but he seems to be on the straight and narrow in terms of what you want a player of his style to be developing like.
Yeah.
Like both him and Iginla, I think, are players that bring like really quite like diverse toolkits in a goal scoring format, which is increasingly becoming important as a goal scorer, of not just being a raw pure goal scorer. You're seeing players that are that to the max, and then as soon as they hit the NHL, they have to really adapt their games and diversify. Like, even players like Cole Caulfield, all 5'7" of him, this season he's been far more effective at even strength for Montreal because he's actually been engaged defensively. He's a lot
Yep.
more involved in transition. He's using his puck handling to solve problems. He's not just a raw goal scorer anymore. He's developed stylistically a lot since the draft, and he was like a slam dunk elite goal scorer on draft day. So when you compare guys like Greentree and Iginla to a player like Cole Eiserman, who is very, very much still just a goal scorer and still has to build a lot more around that to project as a highly impactful NHLer, I could see why teams would be compelled to, if they want to add goal scoring on draft day, to maybe look towards guys like Greentree and Iginla over Eiserman just because of that versatility. And both those guys' shots are also pretty disgusting. So you're not losing too much in terms of that raw ability, even though it is a clear downgrade compared to Eiserman in terms of like the raw ability to put the puck in the net. But hockey's so much more complex than just that. So I think teams will be really intrigued by snipers like this, who bring so much more to the game, especially in the offensive zone.
That absolutely makes sense. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They're a 24/7 sports news channel that runs on YouTube that keeps you updated on what's going on around sports. With the Super Bowl coming up, we know exactly what's going to be showing up on that on that channel. And make sure to tune in for our next episodes as we start our February coverage, and we start things off with a brand new segment. So stay tuned. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.